At South Pole Station, researchers operate in complete darkness for 6 months, enduring temperatures of -117 degrees Fahrenheit. The facility rests on a 2-mile thick ice sheet, sliding toward the ocean at 33 feet per year, requiring the geographic marker to be moved annually. Yet inside this lethal, shifting deep freeze, human engineering has carved out a fragile pocket of survival. Crews operate a hydroponic greenhouse, cultivating fresh vegetables under prolonged artificial light to maintain psychological stability through the long, dark winter. We tend to think of Earth as a forgiving, hospitable place, perfectly tailored to our needs. But if you strip away our modern infrastructure, you realize vast stretches of this planet are actively hostile, lacking the basic requirements to support life. To find out exactly where life is forced to stop, we have to look at the outer edges of biology and engineering. We have to map the extreme corners of the planet, where survival stops being guaranteed and starts becoming a constant negotiation. On the biological frontier, survival depends entirely on adapting to extremes of water. In the village of Mawsynram, India, recognized as the wettest place on Earth, residents endure an average of 467 inches of rain every year. The sheer volume of water cascading off the local limestone cliffs would wash away conventional construction. So the community engineered a biological hack. They guide the living roots of rubber fig trees across streams. Over time, these roots weave together to form massive living bridges that can withstand the constant monsoon flooding without rotting. On the opposite end of the spectrum is the absolute aridity of the racetrack playa in Death Valley. Here, the landscape is so starved for moisture that some years pass without a single drop of measurable rain, leaving a cracked lakebed where heavy rocks slide across thin, wind-blown ice during rare winter freezes. In hyper-arid zones, life survives through extreme, calculated patience. In Death Valley, dormant wildflower seeds will wait a full decade in the dust for enough rain to briefly bloom. Along Namibia's skeleton coast, where dense fogs and strong winds push shipwrecks hundreds of yards inland, highly adapted desert lions have learned to hunt seals directly on the beach. Plants and animals in these borderlands survive strictly by bending to the constraints of their environment. They don't fight the aridity or the rain, they use it. But humans don't always take the biological route. In environments where adaptation is impossible, we rely on brute force engineering, forcing our way into unsurvivable zones purely to extract the resources buried underneath. Take Norilsk, the northernmost city on Earth. More than 100,000 people live inside the isolated Siberian tundra, enduring violent blizzards and 45 days of total polar night, specifically to operate massive metallurgical plants. Survival here requires a massive, continuous expenditure of energy. The city maintains sprawling, non-stop heating systems running through the winter. If those boilers fail, the underground water pipes would freeze and burst, making the city uninhabitable almost overnight. Or look at the Mirny mine, the largest open-pit diamond mine of the former Soviet Union. The crater is so overwhelmingly massive that it completely dwarfs the surrounding town, sitting right on its excavation edge. The logistical cost of pulling rocks from that depth is immense. Massive dump trucks, weighing hundreds of tons, needed 2.5 hours just to climb the unpaved spiral road from the pit floor to the surface. And because of the deep Arctic freeze, those truck engines had to run continuously to prevent the oil and mechanics from freezing solid. Living in these extreme industrial outposts is a precarious, mathematically calculated standoff. It is an illusion of safety, entirely subsidized by burning massive amounts of fuel to keep the machinery moving. Eventually, you bypass the limits of both biology and engineering. You reach the dead zones, places where elemental forces simply reject any attempt at survival. Boiling Lake in Dominica is a flooded fumarole, meaning surface water seeps through cracks in the earth and makes direct contact with underground magma. The edges alone hit 198 degrees Fahrenheit, while the center boils so violently that its exact temperature remains completely unmeasurable. High in the Andes, Laguna Verde presents a different kind of chemical hostility. The temperatures frequently plunge well below zero, yet the striking turquoise water never freezes. It stays liquid because it is saturated with arsenic, lead, and copper, which act as a highly toxic natural antifreeze. Nothing can live in it. Then there are geological barriers. Mount Annapurna in the Himalayas is so steep and burdened with such massive, unstable hanging ice that it generates frequent, spontaneous avalanches. Historically, roughly 1 out of every 3 climbers attempting the summit has died. These locations are the hard physical boundaries of the Earth. Gravity, extreme chemistry, and raw heat enforce a strict border where human incursion is physically prevented. When we do successfully build infrastructure and harsh landscapes, we usually treat it as a permanent victory over nature. But extreme environments are highly dynamic, and nature is perfectly willing to wait us out. The 2,600 square kilometer Chernobyl exclusion zone shows exactly what happens when human engineering fails catastrophically in the face of atomic physics. Following the 1986 disaster, the nearby pine forests absorbed so much heavy radiation that the trees died and turned red. The radiation levels were so intense they wiped out the local microorganisms and insects. Without them, the dead wood simply sat there, completely unable to decompose for decades. But the long-term result of that disaster is unexpected. After nearly 50,000 residents were quickly evacuated, human interference stopped. Left completely alone, the irradiated ruins of the zone eventually evolved into a thriving, overgrown wildlife sanctuary. You can see the exact same process out on the steppes of Kazakhstan. When the military abruptly abandoned entire towns following the collapse of the Soviet Union, the local ecosystem moved right back in. Today, wolves, foxes, and feral horses roam freely through the empty, stripped-out concrete apartment blocks. We can burn fuel, split atoms, and pour concrete to carve out temporary footholds in the most brutal corners of the planet. But if that machinery ever stops running, the environment immediately recalibrates. Ultimately, Earth's elemental forces hold the final claim.